In the shadow of mountains where ancient pines whisper secrets to the wind, Eleanor Mitchell was nothing more than a sacrifice. A young woman with no family to protect her, chosen to appease the monsters that haunted the village's nightmares. Bound by rope and abandonment, she stood at the threshold between two worlds, her auburn hair whipping across tear-stained cheeks as darkness descended. They told her death would be swift. They told her one life given would save many. What they never told her was that monsters, too, could show mercy. As the howls of the Blackwood pack pierced the twilight, Eleanor trembled not just from cold, but from the terrible weight of her own insignificance. She had lived 23 years as a ghost among her own kind, the quiet seamstress with downcast eyes, the orphaned daughter of a drowned mother, the woman deemed dispensable when fear demanded blood. Yet in the golden gaze of the Alpha who approached through mist and shadow, Eleanor would discover that the true monsters were not those who shifted beneath moonlight, but those who sacrificed innocence upon the altar of their own terror. In the caves where wolves walked as men and outcasts found sanctuary, she would confront the chains that bound her spirit long before ropes had bound her wrists. For some are forced into darkness only to discover they were born to rule it, and sometimes a sacrifice becomes a queen. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. Eleanor Mitchell tasted blood on her lips as the ropes cut deeper into her wrists. The forest around her was unnaturally silent, as if every living creature had fled before the approaching storm, or perhaps before the darkness that lurked within the cave ahead. She had stopped crying hours ago, when the village elders had tied her to the wooden post, planted firmly at the mouth of what locals called the Devil's Den. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked from screaming. "Someone help me." But no one would come. She knew that now. The decision had been unanimous. Sacrifice one to save many. And Eleanor, with no family left to protect her, had been the perfect choice. As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted. October in the mountains of Montana was unforgiving, and Eleanor's thin dress offered little protection against the biting wind. Her long auburn hair whipped across her face, temporarily blinding her as the storm clouds gathered overhead. "They said it would be quick," she murmured to herself, trying to find some semblance of comfort in the face of her impending death. The village elders had assured her the wolves would make it swift, that her sacrifice would ensure another year of peace between the pack and the village, a peace built on blood. On her blood. The first howl pierced the twilight like a blade, sending shivers down Eleanor's spine. Another joined it, then another, until the mountains themselves seemed to vibrate with their chorus. They were coming. Eleanor renewed her struggles against the bindings, raw terror lending her strength she didn't know she possessed. The rope gave slightly, but not enough. Never enough. Through the trees, she caught the first glimpse of them, shadows darker than the gathering night, moving with liquid grace between the pines. Eyes gleamed in the darkness, amber, gold, some an unnatural blue that couldn't possibly belong to normal wolves, because they weren't normal wolves. The village knew it. Eleanor knew it. These were something else entirely. The largest of them emerged from the tree line, a massive black beast with shoulders that stood as high as Eleanor's chest, its eyes locked with hers, intelligence gleaming in their golden depths. The Alpha. "Please," Eleanor whispered, though she knew begging was useless. "I've done nothing to deserve this." The black wolf approached slowly, its massive paws silent on the forest floor. Behind it, more wolves appeared, gray, brown, white, and every shade between, forming a semicircle around her. Their breathing created plumes of vapor in the cold air, giving them an otherworldly appearance, like spirits manifested from the mist. Eleanor closed her eyes as the Alpha drew near. She could feel its heat, smell its wild scent, earth and pine and something metallic. The wolf circled her, so close that its fur brushed against her legs. A low growl rumbled from its chest, vibrating through her entire body. "This is it," she thought. "This is how I die." But death didn't come. Instead, teeth closed around the ropes at her wrists, not tearing into flesh, but sawing through her bindings with deliberate precision. Eleanor's eyes flew open in shock as the ropes fell away. The black wolf moved to her ankles next, severing those bonds as well before stepping back. Eleanor stood frozen, uncertain. Was this part of the hunt, Were they giving her a head start before they tore her apart? The alpha wolf stared at her, then jerked its massive head toward the cave. A command, not a suggestion. "You want me to go in there?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible. The wolf growled, taking a step toward her. The message was clear: inside, or become dinner. On shaking legs, Eleanor moved toward the cave entrance. The wolves parted to let her pass, their eyes following her every movement. The darkness of the cave gaped before her like an open mouth, ready to swallow her whole. But behind her stood certain death. At least in the darkness, there was the unknown. And in the unknown, possibility. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The cave was not what she expected. Rather than the cold, damp darkness she'd anticipated, warm light greeted her almost immediately. Torches lined the rough stone walls, illuminating a passageway that sloped gently downward. The floor beneath her feet was smooth, worn by years, perhaps centuries of use. Eleanor glanced back. The wolves had followed her inside, blocking any hope of escape. The alpha brushed past her, leading the way deeper into the mountain. With no other choice, she followed. The passage wound downward for what felt like an eternity, opening occasionally into larger chambers before narrowing again. The air grew warmer the deeper they went, until Eleanor found herself sweating beneath her thin dress. Just as she thought she couldn't walk another step, the passage opened into an immense cavern. Eleanor gasped. It wasn't just a cave. It was an underground village. Structures that resembled houses lined the walls, built of stone and wood, with smoke rising from crude chimneys. Pathways wound between them, and in the center of it all burned a massive bonfire, casting flickering shadows across the entire scene. Above, the cavern ceiling rose so high it disappeared into darkness, though she could see stars twinkling through what must have been openings to the night sky. But most shocking of all were the people. They moved among the structures, dressed in simple clothing made of leather and rough-spun fabric. Some carried water or wood, others tended to cooking fires. Children, actual children, ran laughing between the buildings, playing some sort of game that involved much shrieking and chasing. As the alpha wolf entered the cavern, all activity ceased. The people turned as one to face him, their expressions solemn. Then, to Eleanor's astonishment, they knelt. The alpha continued forward, Eleanor trailing behind in a daze. They approached the bonfire, where an elderly woman sat on a throne-like chair carved from a single piece of wood. Her silver hair hung in a braid over one shoulder, and her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "So," the woman said, her voice surprisingly strong, "this is what the village sent us this year." Eleanor opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. The woman smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Speak, girl. You stand before the pack now. Show us you have a spine." Eleanor swallowed hard, gathering what little courage remained. "My name is Eleanor Mitchell. I didn't ask to be sent here. No one ever does," the woman replied. "Yet here you stand." She turned to the alpha wolf. "What say you, Kieran? Is she worthy?" To Eleanor's shock, the black wolf began to change. Bones cracked and shifted, fur receded, and within moments, a man stood where the wolf had been, tall and powerfully built, with the same golden eyes that had stared at her from the wolf's face. He regarded her thoughtfully. "She didn't beg for her life," he said, his voice deep and rough, as if he didn't use it often. "She faced us with dignity, even knowing death awaited. There is strength in her." The old woman nodded. "Then the sacrifice is accepted." She fixed her gaze on Eleanor. "But not in the way your village intended." "I don't understand," Eleanor whispered. "What's happening? Who are you people?" "We are the Blackwood Pack," the man, Kieran said. "Guardians of these mountains since before your kind built their first mud hut in the valley. Your village calls us monsters, yet they are the ones who tie innocent women to posts as offerings. Then, you're not going to kill me?" The old woman laughed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "Kill you? Child, do you think we bring all our meals home first? No, you're not here to die. You're here to live, among us." "I don't understand," Eleanor repeated, her mind struggling to process everything. "It's simple," Kieran said. "Your village believes we demand a sacrifice each year to keep the peace. We never asked for such a thing. They began the practice centuries ago, out of fear and superstition. And each year, we take their offering, not to kill, but to save." Save? The old woman gestured around the cavern. Look closely, child. Each face you see was once tied to that same post where we found you. Some were accused of witchcraft, others of adultery or thievery. Some, like you, simply had no one to speak for them when a sacrifice was needed. Eleanor's gaze swept the cavern, taking in the faces watching her. Men, women, children, all looking at her with a mixture of sympathy and wariness. But the howls, the attacks on livestock, the theatrics, Kieran interrupted. Necessary to maintain the illusion. We take a few sheep, leave enough evidence to keep them fearful, and they continue to believe their sacrifices keep them safe. And what happens to me now? Eleanor asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The old woman leaned forward. Now, you become one of us. You learn our ways. You earn your place in the pack. And if I refuse? If I want to return to the village? Kieran's expression darkened. The village sent you here to die, Eleanor Mitchell. To them, you are already dead. Return, and they will only tie you to that post again, if they don't stone you first for consorting with monsters. Eleanor knew he was right. There was no going back. Whatever life she had known was over now. I have no choice, do I? There is always choice, the old woman said softly, but not all choices lead to survival. Here, at least, you have a chance at a new life, one where you are valued for your strength, not sacrificed for your weakness. Eleanor looked around the cavern again, seeing it with new eyes. Not a prison, but a sanctuary. Not monsters, but people. Different, yes, but people nonetheless. What must I do? She asked finally. Kieran's lips curved in what might have been a smile. First, you need a place to sleep. Tomorrow your training begins. Training? For what? His golden eyes gleamed in the firelight. To become one of us, of course. To learn what it means to be pack. The old woman clapped her hands and the crowd dispersed, returning to their tasks as if a terrified human woman being brought into their midst was an everyday occurrence. Perhaps, Eleanor realized, it was. A young woman approached, her smile gentle. I'm Maya. I'll show you where you can rest. She held out a bundle of clothing. These should fit you. Your dress? She gestured at Eleanor's torn, dirty garment. It won't last another day here. Eleanor accepted the clothes with murmured thanks, then turned to look at Kieran once more. Why me? Why save any of us? His expression was unreadable. Rest, Eleanor. Your questions will be answered in time. As Maya led her away, Eleanor couldn't help but look back at the Alpha. He stood by the fire, the flames casting his face in stark relief, his expression thoughtful. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance, and something passed between them, an understanding perhaps, or a challenge. Either way, Eleanor knew her life had changed irrevocably. She had been sent here to die, but instead found herself at the beginning of something entirely unexpected. She just hoped she was strong enough to survive it. 12 days had passed since Eleanor first entered the caves. 12 days of aching muscles, blistered hands, and a mind constantly reeling from the strange new world she'd been thrust into. The Blackwood Pack operated like a well-oiled machine, each member fulfilling specific roles that contributed to their collective survival. Eleanor's role, for now, was simply to learn. Focus, Maya instructed, demonstrating the proper way to skin a rabbit for the third time. Cut too deep, and you'll puncture the organs. Too shallow, and you'll leave meat on the hide. Eleanor grimaced, adjusting her grip on the bone knife. The blade felt awkward in her hand, nothing like the metal utensils she'd used in the village. Everything here was different, cruder in some ways, more sophisticated in others. I never had to do this before, Eleanor admitted, carefully inserting the knife beneath the rabbit's pelt. In the village, I worked as a seamstress. Maya smiled, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. Good. We need someone with sewing skills. Kieran rips through shirts faster than anyone I've ever seen. At the mention of the Alpha, Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. She hadn't spoken directly to him since that first night, though she often caught him watching her from a distance, his golden eyes intent and unreadable. Does he ever talk to anyone? Eleanor asked, trying to sound casual. He seems distant. He carries the weight of the entire pack, Maya replied, adjusting Eleanor's technique with gentle hands. There, like that. And he's been Alpha for only 3 years since his father was killed by hunters. Eleanor's knife slipped, nearly cutting her finger. Hunters? From my village? Maya's expression darkened. Yes, they came during the full moon, when many of us were shifted. Kieran's father led them away from the caves, sacrificing himself to protect us. She paused. That's why some were less than welcoming when you arrived. Eleanor understood now why certain pack members still regarded her with suspicion, despite Kieran's apparent acceptance. She was, in their eyes, one of the enemy. I had nothing to do with that, she said quietly. I know, Maya assured her. And Kieran knows it too, or you wouldn't be here. She nodded at the rabbit. Now finish this. We have 5 more to prepare before dinner. As they worked, Eleanor observed the activity around the central cavern. Children practiced hand-to-hand combat under the watchful eye of an older man, while others received lessons in what appeared to be history and lore. Adults moved purposefully between tasks, cooking, crafting, carrying supplies from the surface. How do you remain hidden? Eleanor asked. Surely hunters would have found these caves by now. Maya smiled mysteriously. Magic protects us. Magic? Eleanor scoffed. There's no such thing. Says the woman living among werewolves. Maya countered with a raised eyebrow. Eleanor fell silent, conceding the point. After all, she'd witnessed men and women transform into wolves and back again, something she'd once believed impossible. The entrances to our home are warded, Maya explained. Unless you're pack or guided by pack, you simply won't see them. Your mind will slide right past, convinced there's nothing of interest there. Like the entrance I came through? Exactly. We have 7 major entrances and dozens of emergency exits scattered throughout the mountain. Only Kieran knows them all. Eleanor glanced toward the largest dwelling, where she knew Kieran often retreated. And what about the rest of the pack? Can all of you change? Most adults can, Maya said. Children usually begin shifting around puberty, though some show signs earlier. Not everyone has the same abilities, though. Some are stronger, faster. Others have keener senses or heal more quickly. And Kieran? Maya's expression grew solemn. Kieran is different, even for an alpha. Before Eleanor could ask what she meant, a commotion erupted near the main entrance tunnel. 2 men rushed in, supporting a third between them. Blood soaked the injured man's side, and his face was contorted in pain. Hunters, one of the men gasped as others rushed to help. They've set traps along the eastern ridge. Eleanor watched as the pack mobilized with practiced efficiency. The injured man was carried to what she now knew was their healing chamber, while others gathered weapons and prepared to head out, presumably to deal with the threat. Through the chaos, Kieran emerged from his dwelling. The crowd parted instantly, a ripple of deference spreading as he approached the injured man. Eleanor couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Kieran's expression harden. When he turned to address the gathering, his voice carried across the cavern. Marcus will recover. The trap was iron, not silver. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. But this is the 3rd incursion this month. The village grows bolder. His golden gaze swept across his pack before landing unmistakably on Eleanor. The weight of his stare made her breath catch, but she forced herself to stand straight, meeting his eyes without flinching. This ends tonight, Kieran declared, turning away. I want our strongest at the north and east entrances. The rest secure the pack here. No one hunts alone until I give word. As the pack dispersed to their assigned tasks, Eleanor found herself moving forward, drawn toward Kieran despite the warnings in her head. He was already turning away when she reached him. Wait, she called. He paused, his broad shoulders tensing before he slowly turned to face her. Up close, she could see the fatigue etched in the lines around his eyes, the tightness of his jaw. What is it, Eleanor? Her name sounded different when he said it, each syllable careful and deliberate. Let me help, she said, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. I know the village, the people. I know how they think. Kieran's eyes narrowed. You want to fight against your own kind? They tied me to a post and left me to die, Eleanor reminded him, heat rising in her voice. They're not my kind anymore. For a long moment he studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. Come with me. He led her to his dwelling, a structure larger than the others but austere in its furnishings. A table dominated the main room, covered with what appeared to be maps of the surrounding mountains. Various weapons hung from the walls, knives, spears, and things Eleanor couldn't name. Tell me about these hunters, Kieran said, indicating she should sit across from him at the table. Eleanor gathered her thoughts. There are 5 men who regularly hunt in these mountains. Brothers Elijah and Samuel Tanner lead them. They're experienced trackers who've hunted these woods since childhood. And would they set traps like the one that caught Marcus? She nodded reluctantly. They're known for their trapping skills, but they usually hunt game, not people. Kieran's mouth curved in a humorless smile. They don't see us as people, Eleanor. To them, we're beasts to be exterminated. Not everyone in the village thinks that way, she protested. Though even as she said it, she remembered the faces of those who had tied her to that post. Perhaps she was being naive. No? Kieran leaned forward, his eyes intense. Then tell me why, for generations, they've sent sacrifices to appease the monsters in the mountain? Why they hunt us when we've done nothing but exist alongside them? Eleanor had no answer. The weight of his gaze made her uncomfortable, yet she couldn't look away. The village fears what it doesn't understand, she said finally. And fear makes people cruel. Something shifted in Kieran's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Yes, he agreed quietly. It does. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, broken only when Kieran rose to his feet. Thank you for the information, he said formally. It will help us avoid their hunting parties. Eleanor stood as well, sensing the dismissal. What will you do? About the traps, I mean. Remove them. Ensure they're not replaced. And the hunters? Kieran's expression hardened. We don't kill humans, Eleanor, despite what your village believes. We defend ourselves when necessary, but we don't seek bloodshed. Relief washed through her, though she wasn't sure why she'd been concerned. In the 12 days she'd spent with the pack, she'd seen nothing but cooperation and community, a stark contrast to the competitive, sometimes cutthroat nature of village life. I still want to help, she insisted. I can't fight like your warriors or shift like your wolves, but I'm not useless. Kieran regarded her thoughtfully. No, he agreed. You're not. Before he could elaborate, Maya burst into the dwelling, her expression urgent. Kieran, scouts report movement in the Western Pass. A large group, at least 15 men. Armed? Kieran asked, immediately alert. Heavily, and they're carrying silver. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Silver, the one thing that could truly harm a werewolf, according to the lore Maya had shared with her. This isn't a hunting party, she realized aloud. This is a raid. Kieran's golden eyes flashed with something dangerous. Gather everyone in the central cavern, he ordered Maya. We're implementing the emergency protocols. As Maya rushed out, Kieran turned back to Eleanor, his expression grim. It seems your former neighbors have decided to solve their wolf problem once and for all. Chaos erupted in the central cavern as pack members rushed to gather essential supplies. Children were ushered toward the deepest tunnels, while warriors armed themselves with whatever weapons were at hand. Eleanor stood frozen amid the flurry of activity, unsure where she belonged in this crisis. Eleanor! Maya called, grabbing her arm. Come on, you need to go with the children and elders. But Eleanor pulled back, her gaze fixed on Kieran as he issued rapid commands to his fighters. No, I need to help. You don't know how to fight, Maya insisted. But I know the men who are coming, Eleanor countered. I know their tactics, their weaknesses. Maya hesitated, clearly torn between protocols and pragmatism. Before she could decide, Kieran approached them, his expression grave. Maya, get the healing supplies ready. We'll have wounded before this night is through. His eyes shifted to Eleanor. You should go to the lower chambers. I can help, Eleanor insisted, meeting his gaze directly. These men, I grew up with them. I know things about them that could give you an advantage. Kieran studied her face, searching for something. Doubt, perhaps, or deception. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because he gave a curt nod. Stay with me then. But if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Eleanor nodded, relief and anxiety mingling in her chest. Kieran turned to address the gathering, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. We have 15 minutes before they reach the western entrance. They're armed with silver and likely fire. They mean to smoke us out if they can't kill us outright. A ripple of fear passed through the crowd, but Kieran continued, his confidence steadying them. We've prepared for this. Teams 1 and 2 will collapse the secondary tunnels to funnel them toward the false den. Team 3 will create diversions in the forest to draw off as many as possible. The rest of you know your positions. He paused, his golden eyes sweeping over his pack. Remember, we fight to protect, not to kill. These are scared, ignorant men, not evil ones. Disable if possible, but do not hesitate if your life is threatened. As the pack dispersed to their assigned positions, Eleanor followed Kieran toward a narrow passage she'd never noticed before. "Where are we going?" she asked, struggling to keep pace with his long strides. "Observation point," he replied tersely. "I need to see how many we're dealing with and what they're carrying." The passage wound upward, growing steeper until they were practically climbing. Eleanor's muscles burned with the effort, her hands raw from gripping rough stone. Just when she thought she couldn't go any further, the tunnel opened onto a small ledge high on the mountainside, concealed by dense foliage. Kieran crouched at the edge, motioning for her to do the same. Below them, torches flickered through the trees as a group of men advanced toward the cave entrance she'd been tied outside of less than 2 weeks ago. "The one in front," Kieran murmured. "Is he the leader?" Eleanor squinted, recognizing the broad-shouldered silhouette. "That's Samuel Tanner, the village council's head. The one beside him is his brother, Elijah. And the others? Farmers, mostly. A few craftsmen." She pointed to a slender figure near the back. "That's Thomas Mercer, the blacksmith. He's the one who likely made whatever silver weapons they're carrying." Kieran's expression darkened. "They are more organized than I expected. The harvest festival was last week," Eleanor explained. "It's when they traditionally select the sacrifice, me, this time. When I didn't return as a mangled corpse to prove the ritual worked. They assumed we were preparing to attack," Kieran finished, his jaw tightening. "So they decided to strike first." Eleanor nodded, guilt twisting in her stomach, though she knew this wasn't her fault. Samuel always was paranoid about the wolves. After his daughter disappeared 3 winters ago, he became obsessed. Kieran went very still. "His daughter, what was her name?" "Lily. Why?" He didn't answer, rising to his feet instead. "We need to get back. They're approaching faster than anticipated." As they hurried back down the tunnel, Eleanor's mind raced. Something about Kieran's reaction to Lily's name nagged at her. But before she could pursue the thought, they emerged into the central cavern once more. Most of the pack had already dispersed to their positions, leaving only a handful of guards and those tending to the children. Kieran strode toward a stocky man with salt and pepper hair. "Reynolds, they'll reach the western entrance in 5 minutes. Signal the teams to begin." The man nodded, lifting a horn to his lips. 3 short blasts echoed through the cavern, followed by answering calls from distant tunnels. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, struggling to keep up as Kieran moved toward the armory. "Now we wait." He selected a wicked-looking knife from the wall, testing its weight before handing it to her. "For your protection, not for fighting." Eleanor accepted the blade, noting the carved bone handle and unusual blue-tinted metal. "This isn't silver. Iron infused with wolfsbane," Kieran explained, choosing a similar blade for himself. "One of the few things that can slow our healing. Not as lethal as silver, but effective." "Why give me a weapon that could hurt your people?" His golden eyes met hers, serious and assessing. "Because I'm choosing to trust you, Eleanor Mitchell. Don't make me regret it." Before she could respond, a distant boom echoed through the tunnels, followed by shouts and the distinct sound of rockfall. "They've breached the outer defenses," Kieran said grimly. "Sooner than expected." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "What do? We stick to the plan. The collapsed tunnels will force them toward the false den, an abandoned section of caves we've prepared as a decoy. It should buy us time to evacuate the young and vulnerable through the eastern passages." But even as he spoke, another explosion rocked the mountain, this one closer and stronger than the first. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. "That's not right," Kieran muttered, his expression darkening. "They shouldn't have reached the secondary barriers yet." A pack member sprinted into the cavern, his face streaked with dirt and blood. "Alpha, they've breached the eastern tunnels as well. They came from multiple directions. We're surrounded." Eleanor saw Kieran's composure slip for just a moment, fear flashing across his features before he mastered it. "How? The eastern entrance is warded and hidden. Someone led them to it," the man gasped. They knew exactly where to look. Kieran's gaze snapped to Eleanor, sudden suspicion hardening his features. "Did you—" "No," she protested, understanding immediately. "I've never even seen the eastern entrance." For a tense moment, he studied her face. Then he nodded, apparently satisfied. "Gather everyone here," he ordered the messenger. "New plan. We make our stand in the central cavern. It's the most defensible position." As the man rushed off, Kieran turned to Eleanor, his expression grim. If they've found the eastern entrance, they may know about the others as well. We're running out of options. Fear clutched at Eleanor's throat, but she forced herself to think clearly. The village knows these mountains are honeycombed with caves. They've probably been mapping them for years, watching your people come and go. Impossible, Kieran insisted. The wards. Magic isn't infallible, Eleanor countered, and humans are resourceful, especially when driven by fear. Before Kieran could respond, pack members began flooding into the central cavern. Warriors bearing signs of combat, caretakers herding frightened children, elders moving with dignified urgency. Among them, Eleanor spotted Maya, helping a wounded woman to a makeshift medical area. "Report," Kieran commanded as his lieutenants gathered around him. They split into 3 groups, Reynolds explained, a fresh cut bleeding sluggishly above his eye. One at the western entrance, one at the east, and a third we didn't detect until they were already inside the northern tunnels. Casualties: 4 wounded, none critically. We managed to collapse tunnels behind us to slow their advance, but they're clearing the debris faster than we anticipated. Kieran absorbed this, his mind visibly racing through options. How many men total? At least 30, possibly more. Eleanor's blood ran cold. 30 men, all armed with silver and hatred. Against what? 50 pack members, half of whom were children, elders, or non-combatants. "We need to negotiate," she said suddenly, drawing surprised looks from the gathered wolves. "Negotiate?" Reynolds scoffed. "With men who came to slaughter us in our den?" "They came because they're afraid," Eleanor insisted. "They believe you're monsters who demand human sacrifices. If we could just explain—" "They won't listen," Kieran interrupted, though his tone was gentler than his lieutenant's. "Not now, with blood already spilled." "Then let me try," Eleanor pleaded. "Let me speak to Samuel. He knows me. He might listen." "No," Kieran said firmly. "It's too dangerous." "More dangerous than being trapped and slaughtered?" Eleanor challenged, her fear giving way to desperation. "I was supposed to be your sacrifice. Let me be useful instead." A tense silence fell over the group. Eleanor could see the conflict in Kieran's eyes, the instinct to protect her warring with the pragmatic need to save his pack by any means necessary. Before he could decide, a child's scream pierced the air. All heads turned to see smoke billowing from one of the eastern tunnels. "They're using fire!" someone shouted. Panic erupted. Fire in the enclosed space of the caves wasn't just a threat. It was a death sentence. The smoke alone could kill them all long before the flames reached them. "Everyone to the western escape tunnels!" Kieran roared above the chaos. "Now!" As the pack began to move, Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Kieran, please, let me try to stop this. I can't shift. I can't fight like you can. But I can do this." He stared at her, indecision clear in his golden eyes. Around them, smoke thickened as warriors attempted to create barricades against both fire and attackers. "You could die," he said softly. "So could all of you," she countered. "At least this way. There's a chance." A distant shout echoed from the tunnels, human voices growing closer. They were running out of time. Finally, Kieran nodded. "Go." But not alone. He whistled sharply, and a lean gray wolf trotted to his side, immediately shifting into a wiry man with alert eyes. "Theo will escort you to the western entrance and watch over you. If negotiations fail, he'll get you out." Eleanor nodded, her heart pounding with fear and determination. "Thank you." Kieran caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Eleanor." His voice was rough with emotion. "Be careful." Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, perhaps, or something deeper. Eleanor squeezed his hand once before following Theo toward the western tunnels. The journey through the smoke-filled passages was harrowing. Twice they had to backtrack to avoid advancing villagers, and once they nearly ran headlong into a group of hunters, saved only by Theo's keen hearing. By the time they reached the western entrance, Eleanor's lungs burned and her eyes streamed from the smoke. "Wait here," Theo whispered, shifting back to wolf form to scout ahead. Eleanor pressed herself against the cool stone wall, gathering her courage. What would she say to convince Samuel and the others to stand down? How could she make them understand that the monsters they feared were more human than those who had tied her to a post and left her to die? Theo returned moments later, shifting as he approached. 5 men guarding the entrance. "The leader, Samuel you called him, is with them." Eleanor took a deep breath. Then that's where I need to go. I'll create a distraction, Theo offered. But Eleanor shook her head. No, no more tricks or fighting. I'll walk out openly. Theo looked doubtful but didn't argue. I'll be watching. If they harm you, they won't, Eleanor said with more confidence than she felt. Not when they see who I am. With a final nod to Theo, Eleanor squared her shoulders and walked toward the cave entrance. The guards spotted her immediately, crossbows rising in unison. Stop right there, one shouted. Don't come any closer. Eleanor raised her hand slowly. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, she called out. I need to speak with Samuel Tanner. A murmur ran through the men. One rushed back into the darkness, presumably to fetch Samuel. The others kept their weapons trained on her, expressions a mixture of fear and confusion. Eleanor? Samuel's gruff voice preceded him as he pushed through his men. Good God, girl, is that really you? He looked exactly as she remembered. Broad-shouldered and imposing, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. The sight of him brought back memories of village gatherings, of his firm but fair judgments in disputes, and of the day he had pronounced her the sacrifice, his expression solemn but unyielding. It's me, she confirmed, keeping her hands visible. I've come to talk, Samuel, to stop this before more blood is shed. Samuel's expression hardened. Talk? While my men die in these cursed tunnels? While those beasts tear them apart? No one has died yet, Eleanor said firmly. And no one needs to, if you'll just listen. Listen to what? More lies? More tricks? Samuel spat on the ground. We should have known when your mangled body didn't appear outside the cave. They've corrupted you somehow, made you one of them. I'm still human, Eleanor insisted. Just like you. And so are they, in all the ways that matter. Human? Samuel scoffed. I've seen them change, Eleanor. I've seen them become monsters before my eyes. And I've seen them care for their children, heal their sick, and mourn their dead, she countered. I've seen them save those your village condemned and abandoned, including me. Samuel's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Eleanor took a careful step forward. Did you never wonder what happened to those sacrifices, Samuel? Did you never question why the wolves seemed satisfied with one offering each year? It's because they weren't killing us. They were saving us. Uncertainty flickered across Samuel's face. Nonsense. They're beasts. Killers. Then why am I still alive? Eleanor spread her arms wide. Why are all the others still alive? Lily is still alive, Samuel. At his daughter's name, Samuel went deathly still. What did you say? Lily, your daughter. She's alive. Hope and disbelief warred on the man's weathered face. Impossible. She was taken by wolves 3 winters ago. She was saved by them, Eleanor corrected gently. Just as I was. Just as dozens of others have been over the years. Samuel's hands trembled, his crossbow lowering slightly. You're lying. You must be. I'm not. Eleanor took another careful step forward. The Blackwood Pack doesn't demand sacrifices, Samuel. They never did. That was a story our village created out of fear and misunderstanding. The men exchanged uncertain glances, their weapons wavering. Eleanor pressed her advantage. Think about it. Have the wolves ever attacked the village? Have they ever killed anyone who wasn't hunting them first? They take a few sheep each year to maintain the illusion, to keep you afraid enough to stay away from their home. But they've never sought human blood. Samuel's expression crumpled, grief and confusion replacing his earlier certainty. If what you say is true, if Lily is alive, then where is she? Why hasn't she come home? Eleanor hesitated. How could she explain that to someone who had spent years demonizing the very people who had saved his daughter? Because she found a new home, came a voice from behind her. One where she wasn't just the blacksmith's daughter, but a healer with gifts of her own. Eleanor turned to see Kieran standing in the cave entrance, unarmed and alone. His golden eyes gleamed in the torchlight, fixed on Samuel with an intensity that made the air between them seem to vibrate. You, Samuel breathed, raising his crossbow once more. You took her. I offered her sanctuary, Kieran corrected calmly, after she was caught practicing herb lore and accused of witchcraft by your council. Did they tell you that, Samuel Tanner? Did they tell you they planned to burn your daughter at the stake before we intervened? Samuel's face drained of color. No, that can't be true. Ask Eleanor, Kieran suggested. Ask any of those you've sacrificed over the years. My pack has been the sanctuary for those your village rejected, the different, the unwanted, those who didn't fit into your narrow view of what's acceptable. Eleanor watched Samuel's resolute expression crumble further, the crossbow now hanging limply from his hands. "I want to see her," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I want to see my daughter." Kieran nodded solemnly. "And you will. But first, call off your men. No more blood needs to be shed today." For a long, tense moment, Samuel stood frozen, the weight of revelation and years of grief visibly crushing him. Then, slowly, he turned to his men. "Stand down," he ordered, "and spread the word to the others. We're stopping the attack." As the men hurried to obey, Samuel turned back to Kieran, his expression both weary and wary. "If you're lying about Lily—" "I'm not," Kieran interrupted firmly. "But understand this, Samuel Tanner. She chooses her own path now. If she wishes to return to the village, no one will stop her. But if she chooses to stay with the pack, you must respect that decision." Samuel nodded stiffly, a father's hope warring with a leader's pride. As Eleanor watched this exchange, relief washed through her like a physical force. The fighting would stop, lives would be spared, and perhaps, just perhaps, a bridge could be built between two worlds that had been divided by fear for far too long. Kieran moved to her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "You did well," he murmured, his voice too low for the others to hear. "Braver than any wolf I know." Eleanor smiled weakly, exhaustion suddenly catching up with her. "I just didn't want anyone else to die because of me." "Because of you?" Kieran's brow furrowed. "Eleanor, you didn't cause this conflict. You may have just ended it." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from deeper in the caves. A young woman emerged, her golden hair unmistakable even in the dim light. "Father," Lily Tanner called, her voice uncertain as she stepped into the torchlight. Samuel made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, dropping his crossbow entirely as he rushed forward. "Lily, my Lily!" As father and daughter embraced for the first time in 3 years, Eleanor felt Kieran's hand find hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. She didn't pull away. The future was uncertain, the wounds between village and pack deep and not easily healed. But for the first time since being tied to that post 12 days ago, Eleanor felt something like hope. And as Kieran's hand tightened around hers, she knew she wasn't alone in that feeling. 30 days had passed since the failed raid on the caves. 30 days of cautious negotiations, tentative peace offerings, and the slow, painful work of building trust between two communities long divided by fear and misunderstanding. Eleanor stood at the mouth of the western cave, watching as villagers and pack members mingled in the clearing below. A bonfire blazed in the center, around which children from both communities played a spirited game of tag. The sight still amazed her. Wolf cubs and human children laughing together, their earlier fears forgotten with the resilience only the young possess. Quite a sight, isn't it? Eleanor turned to find Kieran beside her, his golden eyes reflecting the flames below. In the month since the attack, she'd grown accustomed to his silent approaches, the way he could appear beside her without warning. "I never thought I'd see this," she admitted, gesturing to the gathering. Samuel sharing a drink with Reynolds, Maya teaching village women about medicinal herbs. "Peace is always possible," Kieran said quietly, "when both sides are willing to listen." Eleanor nodded, though she knew it wasn't that simple. The tentative truce had nearly collapsed a dozen times in the past month. Old hatreds and suspicions didn't disappear overnight, not even with Lily Tanner bridging the gap between the communities. It had taken endless hours of negotiation, with Eleanor often serving as mediator, to reach even this fragile understanding. "The village council has agreed to our terms," Kieran continued, his voice carefully neutral. "No more hunting in pack territory. No more sacrifices." Eleanor felt a shiver run through her at the memory of being tied to that post. "And in return, we'll provide protection against predators, share hunting grounds in the Eastern Valley, and teach them about the healing properties of plants they've long overlooked." His lips quirked in a rare smile. "And we've agreed to stop stealing their sheep." Eleanor laughed softly, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. Below, a few heads turned toward them, including Samuel's. The village leader had aged years in the past month, the revelation of his daughter's near execution by his own council having shaken him to his core. Yet there was peace in his face now as he raised his cup in a silent toast to Eleanor. She returned the gesture, marveling at how much had changed. She was no longer the frightened sacrifice, nor even the reluctant guest of the pack. She had become something else entirely, a bridge between two worlds, respected by both. They're calling you peacemaker, Kieran remarked, following her gaze. Both in the village and among the pack. Eleanor shook her head. I just did what anyone would do. No, Kieran disagreed, turning to face her fully. What you did required extraordinary courage. Facing down armed men who once condemned you to death? Standing up to an alpha wolf? His golden eyes gleamed with something like pride. Few would have dared either, let alone both. Heat crept into Eleanor's cheeks at his praise. Over the past month, their relationship had shifted in ways she was still trying to understand. Where once he had been distant, now he sought her company regularly, asking her opinion on pack matters, and including her in council meetings. I have something for you, Kieran said abruptly, reaching into a pouch at his belt. He withdrew a small object that gleamed in the firelight, a pendant on a leather cord. The stone was amber, almost the exact shade of his eyes, set in polished silver. It's beautiful, Eleanor breathed as he held it out to her. It belonged to my mother, Kieran explained, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. She was human, like you. My father gave it to her when she chose to join the pack. Eleanor's eyes widened at this revelation. Your mother was human? You're half, he confirmed with a nod. It's one reason my father was so committed to saving humans condemned by the village, and why I continued the practice after his death. Eleanor took the pendant carefully, feeling its weight in her palm. The significance of the gift wasn't lost on her. Kieran, I can't accept this. It's too important. It's yours, he insisted gently, if you want it. Their eyes met in the fading light, and Eleanor understood what he wasn't saying. This wasn't just a gift. It was an invitation, a question. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted below. A pack member sprinted into the clearing, his expression urgent as he approached Kieran's lieutenant. Trouble, Kieran muttered, already moving toward the path leading down. Eleanor followed close behind, the pendant clutched in her hand. By the time they reached the gathering, the pack had formed a protective circle around the village children, while the adults stood in wary readiness. The messenger, a young wolf named Liam, was breathing hard, his eyes wide with alarm. Hunters, he gasped as Kieran approached. From the southern village, at least 20, heavily armed. Samuel pushed through the crowd, his expression grim. Southern village? You mean Oak Ridge? Liam nodded. They're tracking a large wolf they spotted near their livestock, following it straight toward us. Murmurs of concern rippled through both groups. Eleanor understood immediately. With villagers and pack members gathered openly together, discovery by outsiders could spell disaster. The fragile peace they'd built might not survive exposure to those who hadn't witnessed the truth firsthand. How much time do we have? Kieran asked. Less than an hour, Liam replied. They're moving fast. Kieran turned to Samuel, his expression serious. Your people should return to the village. If these hunters see you consorting with monsters, it could put you all at risk. But Samuel shook his head firmly. No, we stand together now. He looked around at the gathered villagers, who nodded in agreement. These are our mountains too, and you are our neighbors. It's time everyone knew the truth. A ripple of approval ran through the pack. Eleanor felt a swell of pride as she watched these former enemies unite in common purpose. Then we meet them together, Kieran decided, his voice carrying across the clearing. Not as predator and prey, but as a unified community. As the group began preparations, dousing the bonfire, organizing into welcoming parties rather than defensive positions, Eleanor felt a hand on her arm. She turned to find Maya, her expression solemn. The elders are gathering, Maya said quietly. They're asking for you. Eleanor followed her friend toward a small group of older pack members standing apart from the main gathering. To her surprise, they fell silent as she approached, regarding her with expressions ranging from curiosity to reverence. The eldest among them, a white-haired woman Eleanor knew as Grandmother Willow, stepped forward. The time has come, she announced, her aged voice carrying surprising strength. Our alpha has made his choice, and the signs are clear. Eleanor glanced uncertainly at Maya, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. I don't understand, Eleanor admitted. Grandmother Willow smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. For generations, our pack has been guided by both an alpha and a Luna, a female counterpart who brings balance to his strength. Not a subordinate, but an equal, different in nature, complementary in purpose. Eleanor's heart began to race as understanding dawned. The pendant in her hand suddenly felt heavier, its significance clearer. Since Kieran's mother passed, the old woman continued, there has been no Luna. We have felt her absence in every decision, every crisis. Her wise eyes fixed on Eleanor. Until you came. But I'm not a wolf, Eleanor protested weakly. I can't shift. Neither could his mother, another elder pointed out. Yet she was one of our greatest Lunas. Strength comes in many forms, child. Grandmother Willow took Eleanor's hand, the one holding the amber pendant. You faced death without flinching. You stood between warring factions and forged peace where none seemed possible. You have shown wisdom, courage, and compassion, the very essence of what a Luna must be. She closed Eleanor's fingers around the pendant. The choice is yours, as it must be. But know that you have already earned the respect of the pack and the heart of our alpha. Before Eleanor could respond, a shout went up from the sentries. The hunters from Oak Ridge had arrived sooner than expected. In the controlled chaos that followed, Eleanor found herself standing beside Kieran at the front of their united group. The pendant now hung around her neck, its weight a reminder of the choice before her. Are you ready? Kieran asked quietly, his golden eyes searching hers. Eleanor looked past him to the approaching hunters, then back to the extraordinary community behind them, humans and wolves, standing together against fear and ignorance. She thought of all that had happened since that night at the sacrifice post, of how fate had brought her, not to an ending, but to a beginning. Yes, she said, reaching for his hand. I'm ready. As the hunters emerged from the tree line, weapons raised and expressions wary, they were met not by monsters or victims, but by a united front, a village and a pack, standing as one. And at their center stood Kieran and Eleanor, Alpha and Luna, the bridge between two worlds that need never be separate again. The hunters slowed, confusion evident in their faces. Eleanor stepped forward, the amber pendant gleaming at her throat. Welcome, she called, her voice clear and strong. We have quite a story to tell you. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.